advancing pro-life, pro-personhood. Today on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of St. Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com. Pam, welcome back to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
I am well. Thanks, Jim. It's always good to be with you.
Yeah, great blessing to have you with us today. And before we begin, I want to remind everybody iCatholic Mobile is the only Catholic mobile phone company in the U.S. today. When you subscribe to iCatholic Mobile, you do help to fund the Station of the Cross. You can check out iCatholic Mobile at iCatholicMobile.com. All right, Pam. So we are, I guess, a couple weeks removed now from actually just, 9 days removed from the National Men's March to abolish abortion and rally for personhood in Washington, D.C. And you were there. You were with us all the way, as you have been for many of our events. Thanks be to God, and gave a powerful speech at the rally. We appreciate that. And I guess that's a good place for us to begin today. We're still waiting on some of the footage to get released. We've got our videographer, John Paul Gutschke, on the case, so we know we're going to get some great stuff from him when he's done, but haven't been able to release any video yet or anything like that. So haven't really talked too much about it other than the Friday with Father show on Friday. But let's start there. What was your main takeaway from DC?
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, Jim, to be honest. I did a lot of praying leading up to that morning, and because of the experience that we had in DC a year and a half, I guess it would have been prior, and how we weren't even able to say anything, to speak out. We were so overwhelmed by the counter protesters. Actually, it was very demonic that year, as I'm recalling. And so when I got up in the morning to get ready for the march, I went down to the breakfast and was just surrounded by Rainbow Coalition. And everywhere I looked, and I thought, oh no, this is going to be difficult. And it was literally pretty amazing because there was absolutely no protest, nothing, during the time that we were outside of the killing center. And then, obviously, peacefully, we marched to the White House. And when we got to the White House, there was another rally going on, but it was loud, but I think they were winding down and it was a little ways from us. And when we got to the part where we were getting ready to speak, and Jim, your opening was so powerful. And this sound system, I think, Jim, was the loudest that we've ever had a sound system. And everyone could hear every single word. And not only everyone that was there marching with us, but because we were kind of in that park in front of the White House, there were so many, just people walking past, obviously visiting, wanting to get pictures of the White House. And they could not help but hear all of the words that we're saying. And I noticed just watching, around, quite a few folks that were listening to what we had to say. And then, of course, 50 yards, 100 yards in front of us, the whole Pride rally that was going on as well. But I really felt like everybody spoke so well. We had some amazing speakers. And because, the sound system was beautiful. There was no way you could have been within 50 yards of the event and not heard every single word clearly.
Our sound guy, Mark, did a phenomenal job. And I noticed that as well. There were some people that would stop and listen. And I think they stayed listening longer than maybe they thought that they would, because our message, so reasonable. And I think when people stop and listen and actually hear it, perhaps they've never heard it expressed that way or heard many of the things that they would have heard from the speakers there. So I think it probably, caught some folks by surprise and made them think quite a bit. Anything in particular that it was within your message that you proclaimed there that you felt was, something that the Holy Spirit in particular was kind of, just stirring in you to make sure that you were going to get out that day?
Jim, I think because when we talk about personhood and the importance of constitutional protections for persons, which would include every human being from fertilization until natural death, because my own personal testimony, of course, was having been conceived and raped. My biological mother was 15 at the time that she'd had me. She was in foster care, which is painful as well. So to think about this 15-year-old teenage young woman who's raped and in foster care, I think what saved and spared my life was the good pro-life people in the state of Michigan, where abortion was illegal even in the case of rape in 1965. So the reality is, had I been conceived under those circumstances a decade later, let's say 1975, I probably would have been killed by the state. I don't know, in a climate where, abortion is the answer every time when it comes to rape, that the state would have most likely just rushed this 15-year-old off to an abortion clinic. And so one of the things that when we talk about personhood, and one of the reasons that I have been advocating personhood at least the last 20 years, is that it's not the pro-abortion community. It's not the pro-aborts that are like, well, we need to make an exception for rape, because the pro-abortion crowd, the people who call themselves pro-choice, but they're pro-abortion, they're for the murdering of unborn children. They want zero restrictions for any reason. They want abortion legal through all 9 months and yet beyond. So it's not a compromise situation. They're not going to agree to any type of legislation that would limit abortion, no matter what your exceptions are. So the reality is that this whole constant putting these exceptions in what we call pro-life bills, like rape, incest, adverse diagnosis, Down syndrome, viability, all of those things, those are done by pro-life people who call themselves pro-life, people who would consider themselves as part of the movement to protect unborn children. And so the frustrating thing for me is this call for personhood, like you said that day and have always said, is common sense. The reality that what we've been doing and what the mainstream pro-life movement has been doing and advocating for the better part of almost 50 years now, over 50 years, is they've been advocating for this incrementalism, for reducing or restricting abortion, not abolishing it. And the only way we're going to see abortion end, the only way we're going to see abolition, is when we declare that a human being is a human person from conception, from fertilization till natural death, and deserving of all of the rights under the Constitution and the 14th Amendment that every person should be given. And so I think it's one of these things where we've always, Jim, you know this, and I've known it since I was part of Personhood Alliance nationally, as well as Personhood Florida, is that we're kind of looked at as the fringe. Like the pro-life movement looks at us like we're some kind of, I don't know, strange beings over here, and that they're the more popular. And after Dobbs, what was interesting is some of the movements, like Lila, I think, with Live Action, said, well, we accomplished this where Dobbs has been overturned. The new North Star is now personhood, as if all of a sudden they've decided they're about personhood when they drag their feet and weren't involved or making those claims prior to Dobbs. So I don't, for me, it's like we need for personhood to be what every single person who considers themselves pro-life or calls themselves pro-life is pushing for, because it's the only thing, Jim, that's going to end this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that to be pro-life ought to mean that you are pro-personhood. There shouldn't be any daylight in between there. And yeah, that was a hopeful moment when Lila Rose and Live Action, and they got some other pro-lifers on board, pro-life leaders on board for that. They had a big press conference. I think it was out in front of the Lincoln Memorial a few years back after Dobbs, and they said abortion is unconstitutional, and they were proclaiming personhood for the preborn. It was great. But sadly, since then, they've not pushed it. We haven't heard them say anything about it again, pretty much after that moment. movement. So that's a problem. And we need to change hearts and minds, pro-life hearts and minds, to become not merely pro-life, but to understand that to be pro-life is to be pro-personhood, which simply means that you agree that human life begins. It's a scientific fact that it begins at conception, fertilization. So you believe the scientific fact that is, and then you believe the very simple truth that every human being is a human person. There's no such thing as a human person that is not, or there's no such thing as a human being who is not a human person. And this is a trick that is done, as we saw in the time of slavery, that you can say, well, you may be a human being, okay, but you're not a human person because we say so based on this sort of characteristic that you have. Back then, it was because you were black, because you were enslaved into slavery, that these are ridiculous things to say that you're not a human person. You have less value as a human being than another human being, and to try to strip them of their humanity in some way, saying they're not a person, so therefore we can enslave you if we want, and in the case of the preborn, we can kill you if we want. So look, to be pro-life is to be against all of that, and to say that the child in the womb, we all begin at conception, fertilization, and that's when our rights begin. Our right not to be murdered begins there. So this is a no-brainer. If you're pro-life, you ought to be pro-personhood. We're going to be right back with much more. Stay tuned.
Tired of your phone bill supporting who knows what? iCatholic Mobile is a 5G provider that supports what matters to you. With iCatholic Mobile, every call, text, and even that group chat you can't escape helps support the Station of the Cross. It's a network that connects you to what's good for both your soul and your wallet. More information is available at iCatholicMobile.com. iCatholic Mobile underwrites with the Station of the Cross.
The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com. And Pam, you had sent me a new book that is out by someone by the name of Mary Ziegler on personhood. And we actually, this has been on my radar. I've been listening to interviews with the author. Haven't read the book myself yet, but the interviews are quite telling. They're always with liberal outlets. And even though the author, I think, may try to take a stance of saying that she's neutral in all of this, I think it's very clear that she's looking at things through a pro-abortion lens. But at least somebody's talking about personhood. Now it's the other side, I think, preparing the way, trying to prepare the messaging, take the framing of it, because the pro-life side doesn't want to talk about it other than us, and maybe I don't know who else is stepping up at the time. Not too many. Sadly, we need that to change. But the pro-abortion side, we see this. This is a big book that she puts out. She's getting a lot of big interviews, and they're talking about it, and that's a good thing in the sense that at least somebody's talking about it. And when she does these interviews, it's very interesting because when she talks about personhood and tries to define it and talk about it and then tries to throw a wet blanket on top of it, the reason there is a certain reasonableness that sort of breaks through, but then she quickly tries to dismiss it and get the interviewer to dismiss it as well very quickly. Well, we know this can't be the way that we're going to go. And why? Because even there's a rift within the pro-life side about how this would affect IVF, how this would affect even contraception to some degree, in the sense of the abortifacient nature of a lot of contraception. That would not be okay if children were declared with a right to life as persons from conception, fertilization. Then killing them with an abortifacient would not be all right. And IVF would not be all right, because again, you're killing embryos, human beings at an early stage of development. And they also bring up the fact that even if if the other side is able to get this through the Supreme Court at some point, they're not going to be able to enforce it. Nobody even agrees on how you would enforce it, whether you would even have any sort of punishment for anybody. And this is what we're seeing in Florida right now. So, I mean, they get the 6-week abortion limit on the books, the Heartbeat Act that bans some abortions. And at the same time, though, they are having a very difficult time enforcing it because they make the enforcement mechanism the abortionist, basically relying on the abortionist to tell the truth. So she does bring up some good points. I think these are the reasons that a lot of the pro-life leaders are dragging their feet. They don't have good answers for these things, sadly, or they're on the side of they want to keep IVF. They want to keep abortifacients. They don't want to fight that fight. They don't want to have any sort of penalties. They don't want to enforce personhood. Whereas we look at all of this and say, yeah, we got to get rid of IVF. Yeah, we've got to outlaw it. Yeah, we've got to outlaw abortifacients. Yeah, we've got to have penalties. We've got to have punishments after it's illegal. When somebody breaks the law, there needs to be enforcement of that. Again, this doesn't seem complicated. There are nuances to all of this to get into, but what are your thoughts on it as you look at the landscape? Are these kind of the main reasons why the pro-life leaders aren't pushing for personhood, or might there be other reasons that you see as well?
No, I 100% agree. And I think that, like you said, your assessment of this author and her worldview are exactly correct. But I think that's why we have to look at what they're saying, because a lot of times they're the ones who actually speak the truth in a way that now it makes sense to our side. You know what I'm saying? And we've even had that with comedians who say, hey, you people, you don't understand what these people are doing outside on the sidewalk and rescuing and these things, or you think it's crazy, but they actually believe there are people being murdered. There are actual babies, real babies being murdered in that facility. And that was from a comedian who is totally pro-choice. And I'm like, that's exactly right. That's what we believe. And so, Jim, and you brought up some really important points. And I think the first thing I want to say about that whole concept is, even back in the days of Lincoln and slavery and the fact that, as you brought up before the break, that Black men or Black women were considered a fifth of a person, not a full person, something other than that deserved lesser rights than others because of the color of their skin. When they were recognized in the Constitution as fully human, that didn't automatically fix every ramification, every law, the fight for their rights and how that would flesh out. And I think sometimes some of the pro-life movement, which frustrates me, is they're like, we can't pass personhood because they're looking at all of these problems that you said, IVF and criminalization and all of these things, and I'm like, no, hold on. We do what's right by the law, Jim. We make the decision that is true. And what's true is that these are human persons from the moment of conception, fertilization until natural death. And once we declare that and acknowledge that, then we can fight all these other battles and we can flesh all of this out. But you don't not do what's right because of some perceived battle. As to the IVF, it's really sad because we heard some on the Republican side, I'm going to put it more that way than necessarily pro-life, but would call themselves pro-life. Certainly the mainstream pro-life type organizations would have acknowledged and called these particular politicians pro-life. The minute that IVF was threatened, they came full force in favor of IVF and did not even question that, are there some restrictions to IVF that you would go along with that you believe should be there? Should we be allowed to experiment? Should we be allowed to sell these embryos that aren't being used? How are we, if they're not even willing to look at that, then to me it's disingenuous. And so they're not really pro-life. IVF is actually it's not ethically or morally right. And for me, the frustration with it is that the reality, the vast majority of circumstances with IVF, and certainly there will be outliers and things that aren't the case, but the vast majority of the reason that we have this huge increase in infertility and this huge desire for IVF treatment right now is because we are delaying marriage and we're delaying having children over a decade. We're contracepting women from the time they're 14 or 15 until they're pushing 30, more than a decade of contracepting. STI infections during that time will highly increase the chances that you'll experience infertility. And then you're waiting to even start a family till you're 32, 34, 35, and your fertility rates are much, much lower. So all of the decisions that you made in the vast majority of cases led to this infertility problem. And now you're asking us to do more unethical things just because you wanted to live your life the way you wanted to live it and not have children till 35. So, yes, there are outliers. There are people who have infertility as a natural case, tried starting to have children when they got married young in their 20s and experienced infertility. But that is the outlier and not the majority. And then the other piece is that IVF is being used, as you know, to provide children to same-sex couples and other disordered sexual family type situations. And so there's a myriad of problems with IVF beyond the fact that we're creating children only to destroy the vast majority of them. So I think we have to be able to morally think about it and not just knee-jerk things when it comes to that. And the other thing, Jim, that I think we really have to talk about, and it's really been on my heart, the reality is that almost all abortions, 60%, the vast majority of abortions now are done via chemical abortion, via the pill. There's no regulation. They're being mailed to women without an ultrasound. Women are taking these dangerous drugs at up to 25 to sometimes 30 weeks of gestation. They're delivering live babies and either drowning them in bathtubs or sinks or pails because they took these drugs that they got in the mail. We've got access to these horrible drugs by men because, again, there's no ultrasound, there's no restrictions, there's no rules around this. And so we know of men who have gotten a hold of these drugs and have given them unbeknownst to their partner because they don't want them to be pregnant and they're having abortions while they're losing babies or miscarriages or whatever, hemorrhaging. It's so dangerous, all of this mess. Here's the reality. We should, and we do, criminalize a man who gives an abortive drug to a woman without her knowledge or consent and baby dies. But I don't understand why the pro-life community struggles with the criminalization of women who choose to take the life of their child on their own, by their own hand. The abortion industry calls it do-it-yourself abortion, which is exactly what it is. And the fact that we immediately throw out the concept of holding women accountable for a decision they made that killed their own child, I don't understand that. And I know people say, well, we have to have compassion. We have to love these women. And here's the reality. This generation of women in the last decade, for sure, certainly since Dobbs, has more information than any other generation of women before them. They know exactly what they're doing. They have been offered more help than any generation before them. There are 3,000 pregnancy care centers across our country. There are myriads of ways they could reach out for help. Many of them utterly reject it, and they make a decision to pay for and have sent to them these very dangerous drugs with limited interaction with physicians. And they're the ones who are seeing their child, whether it's in the toilet, whether it's in the bottom of their shower, whether it's in the pads they're wearing in their bed sheets. And they're actually picking these children up and choosing to flush them down the toilet or whatever else they do. And I do not know how we get away from holding them accountable for the decision they made. And I don't understand. I mean, there was every offer available to them for help in another way. And we even have abortion pill reversal, where if she takes that drug and regrets it, there is a chance that baby's life could be saved. And abortion pill reversal, I think we just had our 7,000th baby born and saved as a result of abortion pill reversal in the United States just recently. So they have all of this support and help available to them, and yet they still choose to take the life of their own child. And I'm wondering, at what point do we hold women accountable? It's just a question I think we have to ask.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for all of that. And this is definitely something that we need to talk about. And again, I think it's quite simple once you get into it. That's why it's important to have these discussions, because the pro-life leadership, the Republican leadership, all these people who say they're pro-life and then won't take a pro-personhood stand and won't even talk about these things because they're afraid of them, they just are hiding out in the darkness in fear. Bring it to the light. Let's have open debate about this. Let's talk about this. And by the way, no one is calling for an ex post facto law that is saying that it would be retroactive in any way. No, this is saying let's make it illegal. And then once it's illegal, if somebody breaks the law, there are punishments for breaking the law. If someone kills an innocent human being, there's a punishment for that when it's illegal, and it ought to be illegal. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel, our guest today, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com. And I guess I want to posit this to begin this segment, and that is that we ought to stand on a very clear principle. And that principle is no killing innocent human beings. Why isn't that something that everybody can unite and agree on? We don't kill innocent human beings. That's not something that we ought to do as a society. So, yes, that would outlaw abortion. That's what abortion is. It's the direct intentional killing of an innocent human being, a baby living and growing in the womb of its mother, being killed. This is not okay. So either somebody holds the principle and believes that abortion ought to be illegal, or they don't hold that principle. And if you don't hold that principle, then what does that mean? You're in favor of killing some innocent human beings. And I just think if someone can say that and admit that that's the principle that they are in favor of, I think they're going to get closer to maybe changing their belief on this, changing where they're at on this, because that's a pretty harsh thing to believe once you look it square in the eye. Are you for killing some innocent human beings? It's a bad place to be. And look, I think we can all look back to the times of slavery before the Civil War, when it was baked into American society, and say, if I was back then, I'd be on the side of the abolitionists. Of course, I would see that that was wrong, and I would be against it. I wouldn't be in favor of it. I wouldn't go along with it. Everybody, I think, would say that now. But look, what would be the principle then? The principle is you're against enslaving innocent human beings. No enslaving innocent human beings. Yeah, we should all be able to hold that principle. No enslaving innocent human beings. Not I'm in favor of enslaving some innocent human beings. I'm not in favor of any of it, right? Why can we see that principle, but we can't see the principle no killing innocent human beings? It's because of the time we're in. And I would say, if that's what you believe now, that you're in favor of killing some innocent human beings, then you would have been in favor of enslaving some innocent human beings back then. In fact, I've been doing a little bit of the research into the history, and always very interesting to do that, and getting into one area that is very troublesome, and that is, were there any Catholic bishops that stood up as abolitionists in that time when slavery was in its heyday in American culture? And sad to see, I really can't find much in terms of any Catholic bishops that spoke up for the abolition of slavery. I found one, the best one that I can find at this point is a Bishop John Baptist Purcell of Cincinnati. It says he's one of the very few Catholic bishops in the U.S. before the Civil War to openly denounce slavery. But even him, it says that while he wasn't militant like some abolitionists, he supported gradual emancipation, but he did make clear moral condemnations of the institution of slavery. So that's kind of the best of the bunch, it seems. Most of them went along with it, even though the Catholic Church's teaching has always been anti-slavery. You can't enslave innocent human beings. And there was a strong document that came out around that time, and it was not received well in America, sadly. So just to think of it in historical context, we got a lot of people going along with it right now who might even say, yeah, I hold that principle, that no killing innocent human beings, but I'm not going to go and be a part of the men's march now. I'm not going to like go out and publicly, put any skin in the game here. I'm not going to do anything that is going to stick my neck out. And that was, again, a lot of what was going on historically, back with a lot of Catholics, in the time, the Catholic bishops. I guess that was the main excuse from what I'm seeing, is that they would say, well, there's such anti-Catholicism going on in the country. We're already not being very well received. If we kind of, oppose this or take any sort of a stand on this, first of all, we don't want to play politics, right? They were using that excuse even back then, but also, we don't want people to turn against us even more. So, we better just lay low. There's all kinds of excuses, right? But the bottom line is, when we're living in a time where they're mass murdering innocent human beings, we all have a responsibility. And so we need to look at reality here and take responsibility, repent of what we've done and what we haven't done, make that new resolve to do more and start living a life of reparation in our time, and to start taking some action. Pam, anything that you want to propose for us today in terms of action? You definitely are one who is taking action day in and day out. How can people get more active, do a little bit more here than maybe what they're doing?
Well, I think they really do need to speak out, and they need to be clear about what it is we're after. We're not after abortion restrictions. We're not after having a few less abortions this year than we had last year. We are 100% for the ending of the murder of preborn children. Done. We want personhood, and we want this to end, the killing to end. I think the struggle is, Jim, that unless you're deeply involved like you are and I am, and maybe some of your listeners have been, the average person that sits in our pews and would consider themselves pro-life, they're easily swayed by what our side, and I put big quotations on it, is doing. I think about in Florida, where we claimed and danced and did victory marches and said the pro-life, movement has won. First when we passed, and then it was able to be enforced, the 6-week ban, which had every exception under the book, and we've gone over it before. Maybe we've had a few less abortions. I'm not even convinced that's true, because they have no way of regulating the abortion pills that are coming across state lines. So the reality is, I don't really know. Was it 12,000 less abortions or 5,000 less abortions? Not sure. What I do know is that on record, there were 65,000 abortions in Florida last year with the law. And so, we stood up and we, made a victory march. We defeated Amendment 4, which needed to happen 100%. It would have been a nightmare if we didn't. However, just defeating that amendment with 57% voting in favor of it, I don't know, that we can do victory laps. And what I see happening on the ground, and I'll be in St. Petersburg, Florida on Saturday, and the bishop, our bishop in the Tampa Bay area, will be there, and we'll see how many people actually show up to actually make a statement. But what ends up happening a lot, the average person, is they're like, Jim, we won. We had all these great successes. Florida is a restrictive state, and why do I need to do anything more? We're building complacency in, and we're allowing people to be okay with these small victories, and that, are they victories? Are they not? I'm not sure. And if we dare to criticize it, Jim, I hear from people, well, Pam, you can just be happy for this. Isn't that good enough? And you know how many times they've told me when I've said, well, how dare you keep putting the rape exception in every pro-life law you make? You keep throwing me and children like me under the bus. And they keep saying, Pam, but you're just a small percentage, and we'll come back for you one day. Let's just exalt and celebrate this victory. And maybe someday, Pam, we'll come back for you. They've been saying that to me for 50 years. And they've never once come back for me. And children like me. And so for me, when you try to raise up the faith community, our Catholic community, when we start to stand up for life, and they sit here and go, well, we kind of did. We voted no on Amendment 4. And so, we did our part, and they feel like they're done. There's no need to do anything more than what they've already done.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we do the Men's March, the Rally for Personhood, is to give an opportunity for people to stand up publicly. There are things that we can do, right? Getting on the ground, getting involved in sidewalk ministry, perhaps outside of a killing center, praying out there and maybe reaching out, getting trained up and reaching out there. By the way, you can go to lovewillendchildkilling.com. I've got some videos up there, some very simple things, how you can get to the sidewalk very quickly and be equipped to really be able to reach out. Some things that I learned along the way, I share them with you there at lovewillendchildkilling.com. But also we need to be able to basically rise up publicly and be accounted for. That's how you make some noise in a political nation that we're in. What do we have? A constitutional democratic republic, right? We've got to stand up and we've got to be accounted for so that the politicians see, oh, wow, something's happening here. Wow, these pro-lifers are now, pro-life now means pro-personhood. What if they got that message? Pro-life is pro-personhood now. And that's what everybody is asking for. That's what everybody is demanding with a sense of urgency, because guess what? We're not coming back for anybody who gets killed today. They got killed today. There's no coming back for them. We didn't step up and save their lives. And that's going on by the thousands every single day in this nation. And we're not rising up and doing anything about it as a group. And so we need to do that. I'm sorry, one march a year, the March for Life, is not enough. Plus, that is not, the messaging just isn't strong enough there. Sadly, they're not saying pro-life is pro-personhood. You won't hear the word personhood at the March for Life, sadly. That should be the theme every single year. End the killing, right? End all of the innocent, the killing of all innocent children. No more, right? That's not the message. It's not a message of ending it. It's a message of getting together and marching for life. And that's about it. And whatever comes from it, comes from it. But look, it's a good thing. Again, I'm happy that we do that. I'm happy that that's a thing, and may it be a launch pad to much more. But sadly, it's a lot of people that go out there and then they say, I washed my hands of it. I did my one thing. I did my public witness. We need more, right? That's not the message that we need to send. The message we need to send is it's time to end this. It's time to end it now. And pro-life is pro-personhood, and all of it now. We're standing up for all innocent human beings right now. And so, look, it's just a message that has to catch on. And so how does that catch on? It's person to person, heart to heart, each person catching the fire of this and saying, all right, I'm willing to stand up on this. And look, we have not gotten huge numbers at a lot of our events. There's one in DC, maybe about 100, but I will say what I saw out there was a refined sort of gold, right? The folks that were there, man, we were united and we were on message, and it was a beautiful thing. I know Boston is where we've had our biggest events. We've had up to, I'd say, 500 people on our side come on out. Hopefully we're going to have that much, maybe even more. Who knows? Maybe we'll get surprised, but we got to catch the fire person by person and spread that fire in the meantime. But the next event for the National Men's March to Abolish Abortion, Rally for Personhood, November 1st, All Saints Day in Boston, Massachusetts. We're going to get all the information up on the website soon, themensmarch.com, but save the date. And, this is for men to march together, but also for all women, children, families to join together at the rally point as well. So mark your calendar. If you can get there, get there. But Pam, look at what we just had over the weekend, these No Kings rallies that pop up. And sometimes we'll have things about immigration that pop up, and they get millions of people out there into major cities across the country. We do not have that infrastructure built. We don't have the ability to do that at this point. The big money pro-life donors, why don't we have the ability to do that at this point? Why has that not been built? Why are we not doing that? We'll proclaim it all day long, but somebody's got to have the money and set up the infrastructure to be able to do that. Is this not an important enough thing to take a big stand on? So that troubles me. But last word before we end this segment, Pam, what are your thoughts?
They emptied the nursing homes for the No Kings rally, so I don't know what that was about. But I hope when you come back, you'll come back and talk about Boston. It was a success. It's making a difference, and I think they need to hear that.
Sure. All right. We'll get into it. And let's put the phone number out there. If you have something you want to call in with on today, any comments here, any questions, anything you want to bring up and bring forward, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. But yeah, the irony of all of this is people say, pro-choice, and guess what? That's really what this does come down to in a very ironic twist. It's our choice. Who's going to stand up? Who chooses to stand up and end this? We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Pam Stenzel, founder of Enlightened Communications, enlightencom.com. And Pam, I do want to ask you about your speaking. Again, folks can connect with you there at enlightencom.com. And then, we'll get to Boston and talk about some of the great fruits there. But on your speaking, you've probably spoken to millions of young people at this point. Can you educate us on what do you think is the number one lie that young people believe about abortion?
I think for a long time, they just believed it was the easy way out when they got themselves in trouble. And I've said for years, because, or that pregnancy is a disease or the worst thing that could happen to them. I ran pregnancy centers in Minnesota, and then now in Florida, I've worked with them. And girls would come in all afraid to be pregnant. So, we do the pregnancy test, and maybe it comes back negative and she's not pregnant and she's ready to bolt out my door. And I had to be like, wait a minute, have you been tested for syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, chlamydia, trichomonas, phlebotomy, arthritis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C? Have you been tested for these? And she would look at me like, what? The biggest fear they had when they were having sex outside of marriage was that they would get pregnant. Like, that was the worst disease. And I think our culture since the 60s turned pregnancy into disease, and then doesn't even discuss the actual diseases that can do long-term damage to their health and their life and their future fertility. So I think those are the biggest lies. And one of the things that I was able to do for almost 2 decades, and sadly it's not possible anymore, but especially from about 2002 until 2012, I was in a lot of public schools. Now, I wouldn't have been allowed to go into a public school and speak if I was just speaking about the abortion issue, but I was allowed to speak about sex and the consequences of sex outside of a monogamous relationship or marriage. And pregnancy is a consequence, obviously. It's what it was intended to do. And there are no good options. All of your good option was before you had sex outside of marriage. That's when the good option was there. You don't have any good options. And I was able to talk about the negative that abortion is and the pain that it can cause. And obviously that it is the intentional killing of an innocent child. Parenting is another option that they have, and offer the resources there if they would make a parenting plan. But I was also able to share my own story and the beauty of adoption and the love that my birth mother had for me in giving me not only my life, but a family. And I really feel we've missed the mark culturally and in the pro-life movement when we don't explain the loving option and the very biblical option that adoption is. The fact that adoption, we're all adopted. Everyone who's listening who is part of the body of Christ, who is, part of their faith, a Christian faith, you have been adopted. Ephesians is very clear that you are an adopted child of God. And so adoption is part of God's plan. And I think the more we raise that up and show women and men too, dads as well, that adoption can be a loving option, and certainly 1,000 times, trillion times better than taking the life of your child. So I had the opportunity to share that to a lot of students, which was amazing, and still believe that this education is so important, that our young people need to know. They need to know the truth about fetal development. They need to know truth about sex and its consequences, and they need to know the truth about choices that are life-giving and life-affirming, like adoption. So hopefully we will not forego giving that information to our kids. The sad thing, Jim, is that today the most controversial thing that I'll say out loud, and the reason I have been probably kicked off most public school campuses in this country, is that I'm very clear that men and women are different biologically, that women are not men and men are not women, and it is a biological reality. And that for that reason, I have not been allowed mostly back into the public system at all, which is a sad case in our culture. But it should not be the case in our Catholic schools. And it really frustrates me when politics gets played in our Catholic schools and our Catholic high schools are refusing to teach the truth when it comes to sexuality, gender, and abortion.
So get Pam into your Catholic schools, enlightencom.com. And so for the public schools, how does that process work when you are invited in? If somebody wants to try to get you into a local public school in their area, what do they do?
Well, it's going to be a lot of work. I'm just going to tell you this. Like I said, it's been very difficult. In the public school, we don't talk about faith, but it's unnecessary because the reality is science is true, whether you put God's name on it or not, right? And so I don't have to speak the morality and to the faith piece. We can just talk about the science and the reality, and that sex outside of a monogamous relationship will always bring a cost. So, if they've got a public school that's willing to do that, the sad thing is, like I said, and maybe it'll change. Pendulums always swing, but since Obama, a lot of the public systems began to shut down, and we're not open to any message of abstinence or sexual risk avoidance or sexual integrity at all. So it's a sad thing. But as I said, the reality is that no matter what the public system is doing, we need to be doing our faith-based schools, whether they're Catholic or Lutheran or evangelical, need to be teaching the right message.
Excellent. Yeah. Connect with Pam. Enlightencom.com is where you can find her. But yeah, let's go to Boston, Massachusetts. So yeah, there's been great fruits in Boston, Massachusetts with respect to the National Men's March to Abolish Abortion Rally for Personhood. Numbers are sometimes a form of fruitfulness, and we have seen our biggest numbers in Boston. Somewhere between 300 to 500 is usually where our events have landed there. Now we did get a lot of opposition last time as well. But that it was even a wonderful opportunity for the men to really display their virtue by God's grace and handle everything very well. And it was a great event last time. And so I hope it's going to be even better, the best yet. All Saints Day, November 1st in Boston, Massachusetts. And look, the reason why is because the men who have heard the call in Boston have stepped up, at least a core of them, at least a few of them. And it actually reminds me of this great quote from Sam Adams. So this is very appropriate to Boston as well. And so American founding father Samuel Adams, this is his quote. This is a great quote. He says, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men." And so that's kind of that idea of, look, people got to catch the fire, and then they've got to share that fire like a brush fire, right? And this is simple once you catch it, right? Every human being is a human person. No killing innocent human beings. We got to end this, right? And we got to stand up to proclaim it publicly, and we got to push forward. And this is what we're called to do as men, is to protect the vulnerable and the innocent who are being exploited and killed and violated in this way. This is on our watch, in our backyards. We've got to step up. And so in Boston, I just want to name a few guys in particular. There's a lot of guys to name in Boston who have stepped up mightily, but three in particular. Joe DiPietro has been a great leader in the Boston area. John Souza has been phenomenal, and Ed Laverty stands out, as well as three outstanding men in Boston who have caught that brush fire and are sharing that brush fire. Again, there are other men as well out there catching it and spreading it. Keep it going. And then on All Saints Day, we're going to be there together in Boston. I thank the Station of the Cross as well. It's the biggest market for the Station of the Cross in Boston, Massachusetts. And so that we have these airwaves in Boston is obviously a big help as well. So make sure you support the Station of the Cross every chance you get. They're doing great work. We're doing great work in Boston by God's grace. So Pam, anything you want to share as we are probably, quite a few months out, 4 months maybe from November 1st, All Saints Day in Boston?
Well, Jim, one of the things that Joe said, I think that people should hear, is that what they're doing there, the brush fire that they're started, has ignited the church, has ignited the faith community that had been pretty much silent. I thought that was huge, and I think they need to hear that.
Praise God. Yeah. So Keep it going. Thanks be to God, all by God's grace, all for God's glory, and very, very grateful for Pam Stenzel and her great work. So pray for Pam, pray for that great work she's doing. And if you want to learn more and connect with her, you can go to enlightencom.com. That's enlightencom.com. Thank you so much for everything, Pam.